Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're digging into something a little different, a 17th century theological commentary. Now, don't worry, we're not going to read the whole thing. We're just going to pull out one single, really powerful idea it has about how you bridge an impossible gap. You know, this whole text we're looking at, it's really obsessed with this one question. It basically frames the relationship between humanity and God as this massive cosmic level problem. Think of a giant chasm, right? And it says you need a very, very specific kind of bridge to even think about crossing it. Okay, so what's the big deal? Why do we need this incredible solution? Well, the commentary starts right at the beginning by laying out the core issue. And we're not talking about a small disagreement here. This is about a fundamental, total separation. So, according to this text, when sin entered the picture, it wasn't just some small hiccup. Nope. It basically ripped open this massive chasm. And because of that, all holy communication between God and humanity just stopped. It created this divide that seemed absolutely permanent and impossible to cross. And this quote right here really nails it, doesn't it? All holy intercourse must have ceased. This wasn't just, things getting a little frosty. The commentary paints this picture of a complete and total breakdown. And a problem that big, it's going to need a radical solution just to even get started on fixing it. All right, so how do you even begin to bridge a gap like that? Well, the first attempt at a solution, at least according to this text, was the Old Testament role of the high priest. You could almost think of it as a job description for a divine mediator, a professional bridge builder, if you will. And this high priest wasn't just any old religious leader. No, he was the guy, the single primary representative for all of humanity. He was the one person whose whole job was to stand in that gap and be the go-between. So the commentary boils down the job qualifications into these three essential duties. First, he had to be taken from among men. In other words, he had to be human. Check. Second, he was ordained for men, meaning his whole purpose was to act on their behalf. And third, a big one, he had to offer gifts and sacrifices for sin. He had to make things right. And the original guy with this job, that was Aaron. But, and this is a huge but, there was a critical flaw in the whole system. The text points out that these priests were compassed with infirmity. That's a fancy way of saying they were human. And yeah, that means they were sinful too. So think about the irony here. They had to offer sacrifices for their own mistakes before they could even start to do it for everyone else. Kind of see the problem? So that big flaw naturally leads us to the next major point in the commentary. The argument is basically this. That whole system, it was never meant to last forever. It was just a placeholder, a symbol that was pointing to someone else, a different and ultimately perfect candidate for the job. And the text zeroes in on this passage right here. It's God's declaration to Christ, appointing him to this role of high priest. This wasn't like a job passed down through the family. This was a direct calling. And the commentary says it was incomparably more excellent and glorious than when Aaron first got the job. A serious upgrade. Okay, this is where it gets really clear. Look at this comparison. On one side, you've got the priests of the law, sinful themselves, needing to offer sacrifices for their own issues, and their job was temporary. It just got passed down. But then look at the other side. Jesus Christ, absolutely sinless, offered a sacrifice only for others, and his priesthood? It's eternal. He was called directly by God. When you see it laid out like this, it just drives home the point that the old system was always meant to be incomplete. So that brings us to the absolute core of the argument. What was it that made this new high priest the perfect, final solution? Well, the commentary points to something you might not expect. It all comes down to the nature of his suffering. Yeah, this wasn't some detached, formal ritual like in the old system. The text describes this intense, personal struggle, strong crying and tears. This wasn't a priest just going through the motions. It's showing someone who wasn't just human on the outside, but who was fully experiencing the sinless infirmities of being human. Fear, sorrow, deep, deep pain. And according to the commentary, this was absolutely essential. But why? Why was that suffering so important? Because to be a truly compassionate and effective go-between, he had to actually feel the full weight of what it means to be weak and to suffer as a human. He had to get it from the inside out to really stand up for the people he came to save. So here's the pivot, the crucial point the text is making. His suffering wasn't a sign of weakness, it was the very process that perfected him, or maybe a better word is consecrated or prepared him for his role. It was the final and most important piece of his training, the very thing that made him the ultimate high priest.
And that whole process, that perfection through suffering, leads directly to the grand finale. Because he was made perfect for the role, he could provide a perfect and final solution to that original problem we talked about, that huge chasm separating God and humanity. How? Well, he offered just one single sacrifice. Think about that. Unlike the thousands and thousands of repetitive animal sacrifices in the old system, this one is described as absolutely perfect and complete. It was one and done. Final. And here's the payoff, the ultimate result the text describes. Remember that cosmic problem we started with, that impossible gap? Well, it's finally bridged. And it's not some rickety, temporary fix that needs constant repairs. No, this is a permanent pathway to what the Source calls eternal salvation. And the Source even gives us a list of the direct results. It's like a checklist, with each one solving a piece of the original problem. The separation from sin? Check. That's handled by full atonement. The broken relationship? That's healed by reconciliation, which then creates a foundation of peace. And that bridge isn't going anywhere. It gives access to eternal life. And so the commentary really leaves us with this one powerful thought to chew on. If the problem at the very beginning was a relationship that was fundamentally and completely broken, then any real solution couldn't just be a temporary patch-up job. It had to be something engineered from the ground up to last forever, to be eternal.